Broadcasting from the KMF Collective Studio, it's time for the Keep Moving Forward podcast. Join us every week as we dive into the stories of remarkable current and former athletes that have transitioned into the real world. Now here's your host, Katie Galley.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 230th episode of the Keep Moving Forward podcast. I'm your host, Katie Galley. In the KMF Collective Studio with me today, I have retired 8-season NFL player turned entrepreneur, Joe Hawley. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm so good. Thanks for having me, Katie.
Of course. Thank you, Joe, so much for stopping by and sharing your incredible story with us today.
Yeah, anytime.
Well, Joe, just to get the ball rolling and get to know your background a little bit, can you share with us where you grew up and how, if at all, was your childhood shaped by athletics?
Oh, yeah. Back to the beginning.
All the way back.
All the way back. I grew up in California, Southern California, Orange County area. I wasn't like super athletic. I was always involved in athletics, but I wasn't like always ever the star or anything. Played soccer, played baseball, wasn't very good at it. Anything with hand-eye coordination sports, I really fell short in that area. I still struggle with things like golf or hitting a baseball with a bat. So that wasn't my strong suit. I was, growing up in Southern California, I was definitely more of I think where I got my athleticism was like extreme sports, like BMX, biking, skateboarding, stuff like that. And it wasn't until high school, my freshman year, when I started playing football, and I just really fell in love. I wanted to play football when I was younger, but I was in California. There's a weight limit to the Pop Warner leagues, and I was too heavy, too big a kid, so I didn't want to lose weight to play. It really wasn't that important to me. And for some reason, when I was starting high school, I don't know why, because my brother, who's 2 years older than me, hated football. He went out for the high school team. He came home almost every day crying that he hated it.
Wow.
I asked all my friends, like, hey, you guys want to go out and play football with me? And none of them agreed. They're all like, you're crazy. We're going to get killed. But so for some reason, deep within my heart, there was this calling to go play this sport. And as soon as I stepped on the field, I instantly fell in love.
What was it about it? I mean, you said as soon as you stepped on the field, it was that, love at first sight. But was there maybe in your first practice or in the first game you played, what was it specifically that made you realize, okay, this is the sport I'm meant to play?
Yeah, I really didn't know a ton about the inner workings of football. I'd watch it with my dad growing up, but I didn't know a lot about how it worked. I mean, looking back on it now, it's kind of a complicated game if you're not playing it. It's really like a chess match. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know a lot about the positions or anything. It wasn't until about halfway through my freshman year, when I was trying to get my bearings, figure out how to play the game. When I play offensive line, for those of you that are listening, and I grabbed onto this guy, this defensive player, and I drove him 20 yards down the field onto his back. And I remember in that moment being like, that's how you play football. And it felt so good to physically just kind of dominate another person and do it for fun. And I realized that this is something I really love. And it wasn't until probably middle of my sophomore year, when the varsity coach actually came up to me and he was like, hey man, you're really athletic. You got good feet. If you really focus on becoming better and getting stronger and bigger, you have a chance of earning a scholarship. And that was the first time playing sports that anybody had ever reinforced positively, you have a chance of being really good at this. And when I heard that, it really lit a fire, and I focused on football. And football, that's when football became the dream. And obviously every kid that plays football has the dream of playing in the NFL, and that was a dream, but it was it's all about the steps, right? So the next step at that point was to get a scholarship, and that's where all my attention went.
And I mean, you touched on it. It's so key to have that support system around you that believes in you. So having that coach say, you can do this, you have the capability. And then, like you said, having that light switch kind of flip on. And so at that time, Joe, you said you started really focusing on, okay, getting the scholarship. That's the next step. Did you have your sights set on a particular school, or was it just, I'm going to get a scholarship and go wherever will take me?
Yeah, I remember going into my counselor's office, I think my junior year, and I never really excelled in school. I was very average grades, And I think I was, like a lot of people, school wasn't built for me to excel at.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, this is when the dream started becoming born, like middle of my sophomore year. And I remember junior year, they sat me down like, okay, what's the plan for college? And in California, you have an option of either state school, community college, or university, which is a UC school. And I told them, I want to make sure I'm prepared to get a scholarship at a UC school, at a university, so that I can make sure my grades don't interfere with me playing sports. And I plan on getting a scholarship. And I remember the counselor looking at me and saying that getting a scholarship is really difficult. And I remember her having, like, I saw doubt in her eyes. Like, yeah, everybody says they want to get a scholarship, but it's not that easy. Like, let's be realistic. And I looked at her, because my grades weren't getting into university, you got to get pretty good grades. And so I looked at her, I was like, yeah, I want to be prepared for this. And so I worked towards that. I didn't have a specific school until I started getting offers. I really had my sights set on UCLA. But for some reason, they said that my grades weren't good enough, which I found out later was kind of BS, because I played in an all-star game with a bunch of committed athletes to UCLA, and they all had worse grades than me. So I knew that it was their excuse of just not giving me a scholarship for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
I got a lot of offers to some pretty big schools, but I was kind of in the middle ground of not being this real elite prospect where a lot of the big schools actually recruited me. They just offered me scholarships. So the reason I decided to go to UNLV was because the O-line coach there was really good, and he recruited me so hard. He called me like every week, and he was at my house. He was recruiting my parents, and he just really made me fall in love with this idea of going to a school, turning the program around, because UNLV obviously isn't known for football. And taking that opportunity was not my first choice. Like, there's no way I thought I was going to go to Las Vegas, and there's no way I thought my parents would let me go to Las Vegas to play football. But I really fell in love with the coach, and he actually, talking about mentors and people that, help support you along the journey of being an athlete. Like, there's so many people along the journey that I owe so much to. And that offensive line coach, his name's Gary Bernardi at UNLV. The reason I went to that school, I don't think that I would have had an 8-year NFL career if it wasn't for him, and it wasn't for playing under him, because of the way he coached me. And he was definitely like a father figure.
Wow. And yeah, I mean, you have to have that support system, and being lucky enough to have that coach really pursue you and prove to you, hey, I want you to come to this school. Was there ever a time, I mean, like you said, you looked at UCLA, wanting to go to a big school, known for football, but then when UNLV, this opportunity came up, was there ever a time in your mind where you thought, man, I really just want to go to another school, I don't think this is the right path for me? Or was it just the coach just pursued you so much, and you really saw the value of going to a school like that you just went all in immediately?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely had a lot of regret and uncertainty my freshman year, because another reason I wanted to go to UNLV was because they promised me that I would start right away.
Okay.
And I had this real resistance to sitting on the bench. Like, my whole career, if I was sitting on the bench, I felt like I wasn't contributing to the team, like I wasn't good enough, and my value and my worthiness it made me feel really crappy to not be on the field. And I knew if I would have gone to one of these bigger schools, I probably would have had to sit out, redshirt, maybe not play until my junior year, even though they're probably way more successful schools and bigger time opportunities. I wanted to play the game that I loved right away. And when I got to UNLV, I didn't play until about halfway through my freshman year. And I was always young too for my grade. So I actually started university at 17, and I played in my first game at 17.
Wow.
But I remember the first few games, they weren't playing me. I got really frustrated. I remember calling my parents and being like, I want to transfer. I don't want to, I came here to play. If they're making me sit and wait, then I might as well transfer and go to a better school, because we're not winning. And it was just like this huge downward spiral of self-doubt and questioning why I went to UNLV. And I definitely had to deal with that. And it wasn't until about halfway through the year, they started playing me more. I started being able to actually play. And, it was really tough. Playing at UNLV, we didn't have one winning season while I was there. We went 2-10 my freshman year, 2-10 my sophomore year, and then we went 5-7 both my junior and senior year. And we were really close to making a bowl game both my junior and senior year, and we fell short both times the last game of the season. So it was very disappointing for somebody who puts a lot of their, I've grown a lot, but at that time I was putting a lot of my self-worth into performance on the field. And I got really frustrated when we would lose. Like, I hated losing more than anything. I was super competitive. And it was, having that fire is part of the reason that I made it so far in the pros, was because I was so passionate and wanted to win so bad, and I hated losing. Mm-hmm. And so that really did not, come out well in that journey through college. And it was really difficult at times, definitely.
But I mean, that's, you touched on something. I think that happens to so many athletes, if to some degree, not all of them. I mean, whatever level you play at, if you dedicate any amount of your life to a sport, it's so easy to get wrapped up in it. And then your worth, like you said, is tied to your successes, your failures in that sport. And so then coming out on the other side, how you navigate that, which of course we can get into later, how you successfully did that after your career. But then, Joe, I mean, from that time, having that passion and that fervor, going to UNLV, and reflecting back now, having the perspective of that your coach really did help you catapult you forward into having your successful NFL career. But then at that time, coming up on graduation, getting ready to pursue that next step of going to the NFL, what were you feeling? What were you going through? Were you really concerned about not making it to the NFL?
Yeah, I had very realistic expectations, unlike a lot of players. I mean, there was some guys on my team that weren't even starters at UNLV, which is not a very well-known school. Like, maybe one guy every couple of years gets drafted out of this school, thought they were going to go pro. And it's like this delusions of grandeur that everybody has an opportunity. And I was very realistic. I was like, okay, it's going to be really hard to make it. And my goal when I first was done playing was my dream really was to get invited to the combine. And each year there's only about 270 to 300 athletes or football players that get invited to the combine. And that's a huge thing, especially coming from a small school, because it would give me an opportunity to showcase my athleticism and get in front of these teams and really showcase who I am as a player. And when I got that letter in the mail inviting me to the NFL combine, it was this huge, just ecstatic, joyful experience, because it was this dream that I got to go perform and put my best step forward for this opportunity to play in the NFL. And when that happened, that's when the real opportunity of okay, this is no longer a pipe dream. This is an actual opportunity for me to go play. Really took hold, and I really focused. I really worked my ass off to go in there. And I was actually projected coming out of UNLV like a 7th round free agent, preferred free agent kind of pick. And I did so well throughout the draft process that I ended up getting drafted in the 4th round. And the whole experience was really incredible. It was really cool. It was a dream come true.
Wow. I mean, being able to do that. And then too, though, reflecting on the, like you said, having realistic expectations coming out of college of what was going to happen next. And so it's a testament to, like you said, having those realistic expectations, but then putting one foot in front of the other, doing what it takes to make those necessary action steps come to fruition. And so then for you, like you said, it ended up being more than you ever imagined, because it brought you to being actually drafted.
Yeah. It's pretty wild, because you have to have this, it's a balance. You have to have this unwavering belief in yourself and your ability to make it, but you also have to understand the probabilities, and you have to be realistic about it. And, I think a lot of people, it's really hard. It's really hard to navigate, because it's such a pinnacle sport, and you have to be such an elite athlete, but you also have to have the right mindset. There's all these factors that go into it, and you have to have the deep, singular desire and belief that you're going to make it, or else it's just going to get too hard and you're not. So without that, you can't make it. But then there's people that have that they're not going to make it, and it's hard. It's a hard balance to navigate.
And can you maybe point to or think of, how you kind of navigated that, like you said, finding that balance, but then having those realistic expectations in pursuit of these lofty dreams and goals that you had? How did you keep yourself grounded in that process?
Yeah. I think I had really good really good coaches, really good support system. I think, that were really grounding, and they kept my expectations realistically. Like I remember my strength coach, John Greco, at UNLV, he told me to my face, like, hey, you play for UNLV. Like, the odds of you getting drafted are very slim, but if you are good enough, you'll get invited to a camp and you'll make it. And there was other players that, I remember one of my teammates at the time, he swore to me that he was going to be a second-round draft pick because his dad and his agent that he hired said so. And so when you surround yourself by people with these lofty expectations, and they so-called blow smoke up and create these false expectations, you buy into that and you believe them. It's really setting you up for failure. And so I always had this idea that if I make it to a training camp, I'm going to prove myself. That's all I need is a foot in the door. But dream for the best, but always expect that all you need is an opportunity. And if you are good enough, you're going to get an opportunity. And you got to understand that as soon as your time is up or you didn't make it, I think taking responsibility for, okay, I'm not good enough. Instead of blaming others for where you're at. I know that's really hard for people to if they don't make the pros or they don't make it to the next level, they can blame their coach, or they can blame they didn't get the right opportunity, or this person screwed them over. But if you're good enough, I've seen it plenty of times in the NFL. There's so many guys that, make the NFL that you would look at and be like, oh, there's no chance, but they worked their asses off to get there. And so if you are good enough, they will find you, especially nowadays, and just trust that you just got to work your ass off and not blame others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you said, it's taking that ownership, I guess, and realizing, of course, there are things that are beyond your control, but the way you react to those things, that is totally in your control, and how you remain grounded and not kind of get swayed by others. It's being grounded in your own realistic expectations and being grounded in your own mission. And so then, Joe, from there, getting drafted for the fourth round, and then looking forward, can you walk us through your then next 8 seasons in your NFL career that ultimately led you up to your retirement?
Oh, what a journey. Yeah, so I could talk about that for a whole long time. It was a very up and down journey.
Yeah.
They say one of the hardest things to do, I think, in all of sports is make it to the NFL. I think the odds are less than 1%. I think 215 out of 100,000 seniors that play high school football end up making it to an NFL roster for 1 year. What they don't tell you is once you get to the NFL, how hard it is to actually stay and the longevity of a career. I think the average career for an NFL player is 3 years. And, every year they're trying to replace you. And if you're not performing at the highest level, then they will replace you. There's always younger talent, there's cheaper talent, and it's very strenuous and very difficult. And when I got drafted, it was one of the best moments of my entire life. It was a dream come true. And then I got to Atlanta my rookie year, and I went from playing at a small school like UNLV, playing against NFL talent maybe a couple times a year, to playing against the best athletes in the world every single day at practice. And it was really challenging. And going and being around those elite athletes, grown men. I was 21. There's these 30-year-olds, 34-year-olds, full families. They're just grown-ups. It was a very intense environment of high-performing athletes, and it was really difficult my rookie year. Finally got to see the field my second year, but it was out of position. I played center, and I ended up getting an opportunity to play right guard. My second year, because of the right guard that was starting got hurt. And it was my first time seeing the field. I played pretty well, I thought. But then after that year, the starting center was set to retire, and I thought I was going to be the guy that replaced him. But they ended up drafting that offseason the best center in the draft, who ended up taking his spot. And that left me crushed, because that was the first moment in my NFL career realizing, there's no real loyalty. It's your performance on the field is the only thing that matters. And I felt really betrayed. And I went into kind of a little bit of a depression. I barely made the team that year. I was in that mindset of blaming others, the victim mentality. I was like, you know what? They didn't give me an opportunity. The strength coach doesn't like me. I was just making all these excuses, and it actually led to this point where I actually was almost about to get cut. I was in front of the head coach and the GM. They're about to release me, and ended up, through circumstance, they ended up keeping me as the last man on the roster and gave me another opportunity to work my way back. Finally, that was like a real pinnacle changing moment in my whole career. It was my third year, and I realized in that moment when I was almost released from the team that all the people that I was blaming for where I thought I was at and how I thought I deserved a better shot and they weren't giving it to me, none of those people were going to care if I was on the street looking for a job. And it was the only person, like, it really filled me with regret because I knew in that moment, like, I was the only person to blame. And when they gave me a second chance and said, we're going to keep you and give you an opportunity to work back, I promised myself in that moment that I would not ever, there was going to become a moment when I wasn't playing football anymore, but it wasn't going to be because I didn't give it everything I had and work my ass off. I never wanted to be filled with that feeling of regret, like I could have gave more to make my dream a reality. Yeah. And so that was a real turning point. And so my next year, I ended up working my way all the way back. That following year took like halfway through the season. I worked my way back to becoming the starting center again. And then the following year, I blew my knee out, ACL, MCL, total reconstruction. I missed 11 months. Wow. And it was this huge, this huge heartbreak thing where it was like I finally had everything going for me. And then I blew my knee out. And then when I was coming back healing from that, the Falcons weren't satisfied with where my knee was at, how the recovery was going. The knee was pretty bad. I was struggling during that training camp. So they ended up releasing me. And so I had to restart, fresh start. I went to Tampa Bay. Thank God they gave me another opportunity. And it was kind of this resurgence of my career. And it was a great opportunity. I ended up going there as a backup. And the first game I was there, the starting center rolled his ankle, and I ended up starting the following 2 years. Wow. As his replacement. And then my last year, they brought in another younger guy, and no hard feelings against him. He was one of my good friends, but the way football works, they're always trying to get younger and replace you. And they put me in my 8th final year. They put me in another competition with this guy, and I ended up losing my starting job for the 5th time in my career. And that's when I realized, you know what, I'm tired of having to prove myself. I've made enough money. My body is starting to break down. And that's when I decided it was time for me to finally walk away.
Wow. So it was, of course, like you said, it was your decision. You're tired of having to prove yourself, tired of putting your body through all of that rigor and the injuries. But then too, whether or not you made the decision, it's still such a challenging thing to do. I mean, it was part of your life for so long. I mean, probably as long as you can remember, since high school, and to play 8 seasons, achieve your dream, come off of those 8 seasons, and then decide to complete that journey. So then for you, Joe, coming off of that 8th season, once you decided you were done, decided to retire, what was that like for you? I mean, navigating that transition of, okay, I'm no longer going to be playing professional football, and then looking forward.
Yeah, it was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Going into that process, there's 2 sides of it, right? There's a piece of me that was really excited about the opportunity to be done because it was so hard having to be, a lot of people don't realize it's a 24/7 job. I have to perform at such a high level. It comes with a lot of stress, anxiety, having to eat to keep this weight on as an offensive lineman. My body just in pain constantly. Every day I woke up in pain. And so there was a piece of me that was excited to know what life was like without all of that. But then there's this other side of me that, I played football for 16 years of my life, going back to, like we talked about, my freshman year when I first fell in love with the game. And I was living out this childhood dream, and I was so singularly focused on accomplishing that dream, which you have to be to make it that far. There was really, nothing else I really thought about doing. And so when I finally walked away, and I find myself very grateful for and proud of myself for the journey that I was on, and grateful for the opportunity to have walked away on my own terms. I know a lot of athletes don't get that opportunity. Their careers are usually cut short for whatever reason, but I was totally footballed out. And when I walked away, there was this deep void of something missing that I was totally unprepared for. And although I was really excited about the journey and trying to figure out who I was without the game, I was always very conscious and aware, and they tell you this throughout school and throughout your time as an athlete, is like, make sure you know that, athletics is what you do. It's not who you are. And I was always very conscious of that, but it still, that's why it surprised me that even me, with this awareness of that, when I was done, I was like, oh my goodness, football was so much more who I am than I thought. And I have to figure out who I am without this. And walking away from, millions of dollars and a childhood dream, it was, part of the difficulty of that was, my friends and my family, especially, not really understanding why I would walk away. Like, it's something I worked so hard to achieve. So many people would, in their minds, easily trade places with me to be in the NFL and make that much money and have that experience. But you just really don't understand unless you're going through it and how hard it is. And I was ready to move on, but a lot of my support system didn't really understand. So it was a bit of an isolating experience as well.
Man, I mean, there's so many levels of it, because one, I mean, two, that must be so challenging to try and make somebody understand, yeah, I achieved this big thing, and I mean, I did achieve my goal and my dream, but it's time for me to step away. I mean, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and I mean, at some point, everybody comes up on that, whether it's a navigation to transition out of sport or whatever it is into another career, into a life change. It's navigating that transition, whether you choose to or not. But I think two, the impact it had on you, even though you chose to step away, you knew that you were something more than an athlete. You knew that life was after sport, and athletics is what you do. It's not who you are. But even in that, recognizing, wow, this is still really challenging. And it's something I think it's easy to forget that athletes, no matter what level you played at, if you somehow made your identity wrapped up in your sport, it's something you'll struggle with forever. I mean, it kind of creeps up on you in ways you don't expect. It hits you home in just a bunch of different ways. And whether you're prepared for it or not, or you think you're prepared for it, it's like it keeps sneaking in there because your identity has been so entrenched in it for so long. It's I mean, almost impossible to figure out a way to kind of break from that, even if you're self-aware of the fact that it's not, that you don't want it to be.
Yeah, that's one thing I've realized is, that they talk about the transition, right? The transition out of sports into whatever you do next, with the real world. And, what I've realized through my own transition, I think it's going on year 3 now being done, is that, the transition isn't a finite number of years or a thing you go through and then you come out the other side. As an athlete, at no matter like what level you played, where you got to, like, the transition is something that you live with your entire life, and it becomes this thing that you have to integrate into your life. And when I was done playing, a piece of me was almost, I kind of ran away. Like, there was a piece of me that was like, okay, like, I'm done with football, and I needed to separate myself from it. And it wasn't until like a year and a half, 2 years, and I actually gave myself this opportunity to really grieve the loss of it. And I have to integrate that journey and that piece of me, because it is a piece of me. It's not something I can just say, okay, I'm not a football player anymore, let me go do whatever. It's something I need to integrate into who I am and a new version of who I am, and it's always going to be there. I think that's an important thing for athletes to understand that are going through transition. It's not something that you're going to come out the other side and be someone that never played sports. It's something you have to integrate into your life as you move forward and learn these new skills, and use it as an advantage, because athletes have a special kind of mindset. They have the ability to push themselves outside their comfort zone, to overcome pain, to overcome self-doubt. And all of these intangible tools can be used to find success and greatness outside of sports. And to use those and to know that that is a piece of who you are is very important.
100%. That's such a good point. And I think too, like you said, to get there, one of the key things you have to do is allow yourself to grieve. I mean, it's a part of you. It's a piece of who you are, something you've done your whole life. And so to get to a point where you allow yourself to be sad and live in that sadness, but then you have to come to the realization of, okay, now I'm going to move forward. I'm going to figure out how to use everything I learned as an athlete to help me transition, to help me in whatever path I go down. Because like you said, I mean, everything you learn in athletics, it is directly transferable to whatever we choose to do next. It's just learning how to navigate and use those specific skills in order to help propel you forward.
Absolutely. We all, I believe we all have a purpose and a point to the existence that we're living, and athletics may be a piece of that purpose. It may provide the lessons of learning how to navigate, but it's not the only purpose. There's definitely purpose outside of sports, and whatever kind of athlete you are or however long you played, that is a piece of the story of who you are. And it might have provided the lessons and the foundation for what you're meant to do in the world outside of sports. And just knowing that there is so much opportunity to improve your life and, provide service to the world in a bigger way if you can really look inward and find out what your purpose is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so profound because you're right. It's a piece of your purpose, but it is not the only piece of it. It's not your whole purpose. And so it's using that athletic ability, using that, those inherent skills that you learned to help push you forward. And so now, Joe, for you in that 3-year interim, once you really started to grieve and realize, okay, I am sad. This was a piece of my identity. I felt tied to football. I wrapped my value and purpose up in it. Coming out on the other side of that and starting to sift through those feelings, what did you discover, and what did that kind of set you on the path towards in your journey into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's funny, like my journey through football, like I loved it so much. I always told myself I wanted to be a coach when I was done. And no matter how long I played, how far I made it, I wanted to be a coach. And I always told myself the only way that wouldn't happen is if I made enough money and could like kind of try other things. And it wasn't until like my 6th or 7th year in the league when I was finally I was footballed out. Like I just had played so much football, and I didn't want to become a coach anymore. Like I wanted to experience something new, challenge myself in a new way. And so I started getting excited about the idea of entrepreneurship, about starting my own business. I really fell in love with the idea that you can create something from nothing and birth it, create an idea and manifest it into reality. And I thought that was so cool. And so I started devouring business books, learning as much as I could. I watched all the episodes of Shark Tank, and I really fell in love with this idea. And I knew when I was done playing that I want to give my go at, starting my own business and getting into that whole world. And I knew before I jumped into that, and I know being such a high achiever that it was going to be all encompassing and consume a lot of my time and my effort. I saw an opportunity, and I had some space where I wanted to make sure I took advantage and explored my freedom for the first time. And so that's when I decided to buy a van. I rescued a dog, and I ended up traveling the country for a better part of a year and a half. And I kind of started that trip, not really as a journey to go discover myself, but that's definitely what ended up happening. I ended up going just to kind of experience my freedom. I went through a big breakup. I was engaged my last year and ended up breaking that off. And so I felt very isolated and alone. Part of, my career, my dream of playing football was in the rearview mirror. This woman, this relationship that I created that I, envisioned having a future with was over. And so I felt like I needed to keep moving and go explore my freedom for the first time from this sport. And I had friends and family all over the country. And so it was a trip at first to just go hang out with my friends, experience it. And it turned into so much more. I found out a lot about myself, a lot of time on the road. And I learned, a lot by listening to audiobooks and doing this work on myself and questioning the stories. And finally had the opportunity to get involved in business. Actually, my first go at business, I partnered with a guy that had this recipe for this macadamia nut butter. We started a company. I thought it was going to be more of an investment. Ended up failing miserably. But the good thing is I learned a ton from that experience. And the one thing I did learn from all the business books I read, because they started getting very redundant. And the big lesson from all of it is the only way you're really going to learn is by doing it and by failing as fast as you can. Like in business, you're going to fail, but every failure is a lesson. And I think I really connect with that from football too. One of the first lessons I learned playing football was my freshman year. It was like almost the first week I was on the football field. It was, if you want to be successful in football and in life, you have to be coachable. And making mistakes there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. Like, nobody's going to get on your ass for making a mistake. But if you make the same mistake twice, then you either don't care or you're incapable of improving. And I really connected with that. I think that goes really well into business as well. Like, you're going to make mistakes and you're not going to be able to learn or grow if you don't make the mistakes. And so I realized the fastest way to learn and grow and become better is to make the mistakes as fast as possible. And the only way to do that is to get out there and start going. And so that first experience in business, I could look at it as, I invested some money. I lost quite a big chunk of change, but I could look at that as like, oh man, I made the wrong decision, this and that. But the way I do look at it is I learned so much from that experience. And it's every step of the way, I've just continued to grow and just having this, mindset of I don't know anything and just trying to learn as much as I can. I think in the business world, that's so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's that kind of quintessential phrase of you learn much more from failing than you do from success, right? And so it's, I like what you said about you have to just try it. You have to put yourself out there, do it, and then fail. If you're going to fail fast, and then pivot, transition again, like you learned from being an athlete. But initially, Joe, when you first started on this journey that led you to macadamia nut butter and then eventually to where you are today, what made you decide that? I mean, I know you said you had friends, family all over the country that you decided you wanted to visit. But at what time did you, I guess, have a mental shift of thinking this is actually more than just me visiting people? This is kind of a life journey that I'm on, and then made you want to create Man Van Dog Blog? I mean, adopt a dog and get a van. Like, what made you want to create this platform?
Yeah, so actually the Man Van Dog Blog started as this opportunity I saw to dip my feet into the water slowly in the business world.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to take the trip. So I bought the van, and I thought, if I started an LLC, started a company and started a blog, I could write off all the gas mileage. I could write off all the van stuff, all the travel. And so it was really this way of, I hired a branding company to create the logo. And so it was this way of me kind of learning business in like a fun, non-threatening kind of way, like an easy access point while I got to travel. Mm-hmm. And that actually, by sharing through the blog and through my website and through social media, it actually grew into like something in a platform that I didn't really expect. And, getting feedback from some of my followers that were following on my journey, because I got USA Today did an article and ESPN did an article. So it kind of blew up and people were following me on this journey. And I was getting a lot of feedback of how I was inspiring people by the life that I decided to live walking away. And, for me, it was just like, it was normal. But, hearing from other people how it inspired them really made this desire to be of service in a bigger way. And it was like, wow, I really do have a platform to really help shift people's perspectives. And, by sharing my journey and my thoughts, it really does have an impact on people. And that really took hold of me and made me realize, okay, like, how can I use this? And while I was traveling, I was still like, what is my purpose, right? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And I realized that there is a huge, gap in this transitioning out of athletics. And for me personally, the big thing that was missing was a community of like-minded people that I could share my experience with, that have gone through or are going through similar experiences. And I just, the NFL offers a lot of, benefits and opportunities for transitioning athletes, but there's still no real community of people that really want to get into entrepreneurship or find greatness and success outside of sports, and want to move on and learn and grow. And so by traveling over the last couple of years, I've realized that I want to kind of fill that void. And I think what I've learned is any good entrepreneur finds a gap in the market for an idea, and they make that idea, if it's something that they could value or get benefit from or get value out of, they create it. And so what I'm working on now is launching a community, a business. It's going to be called the Heart Collective, and we're launching November 2nd, and it's going to be an online platform community for former male professional athletes. Obviously, it's going to start mostly with NFL guys because that's my niche in my community. But I really want to scale it to all male professional athletes and hopefully eventually create some kind of mentorship program for collegiate athletes that don't make the pros, that are trying to figure out, purpose and identity. But the real purpose of the business and the community is the connection that we can all support each other through this experience of transitioning and, learn and grow together, because that's one thing that's missing. It's like a lot of one-on-one, like if I want to go talk to somebody, they really don't understand the experience that I'm going through. But if we can all come together and support each other and learn from one another, then we can really take the intangibles, like we talked about earlier in the episode, of what it takes to become a professional athlete and refocus that on ourselves and, show up in the world and create a better world for ourselves, our families, and our communities.
That's awesome. And I mean, yeah, you're starting with former male NFL players, but you're right. You start with your niche. You start with the community that you have. Then, like you said, you expand it from there into all different areas and help all sorts of transitioning athletes. And so launching November 2nd, that's great. I mean, it's coming up. Why the name The Heart Collective?
Honestly, I was thinking about what I wanted to call it, and I was doing some Google searches, and I just really connected with this idea of heart, right? I always played the game with a lot of heart, and I think, it takes a lot of heart and courage to focus on yourself, to become the best version of yourself, and it takes a lot of heart and courage to make it that far in the NFL and in athletics. And so I actually Googled the word heart to kind of see what names I could figure out. And the way it's spelled is, I don't know, like the pronunciation of it is H-A with 2 dots over it, R-T. And I thought that was really cool. So I called it The Heart Collective. The way it's spelled is H-A-R-T. And it just really stuck. It really felt really powerful to bring all these guys together and focus on, the self-development, self-work, and the heart that it takes to show up for yourself, for your families, and for your communities, and to create a better world.
And so, Joe, with this incredible platform that you're going to launch coming up soon, what are your hopes with it, your goals with it? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, the whole thing is community, and I just really want to provide a safe container for guys to express really how they feel. I think the big shift that's happening now in the world is, this false idea of what it means to be masculine, to be strong, to be a leader. And it's really, I don't think there's a lot of places for guys, especially these high performing professional athletes, to express themselves vulnerably. So I want to provide tools, education, and coaching to help them access this part of them. And if they go, talk to somebody, it's hard to talk to somebody and share really your experience vulnerably if that person can't really receive it or understand or relate. And so creating a safe container for these guys to really just be able to be heard and to process what they're going through and to know that they're not alone is the real goal of the community. And then the bigger vision is, getting these high performing, high achieving, influential athletes who are mentors and people that our society looks up to, and get them to focus all that energy they put into their sports onto themselves, and questioning the self-limiting beliefs of why they can't be successful outside of sports, and using all of that to collaborate and create a better world by using this connection in this community to really influence and create a better place, not, for them individually and for their families and for their communities.
I love that. I mean, it clearly is such a needed platform. I mean, you live that experience of coming out the other side of the NFL and specifically focusing in on male athletes and how they can use that. And because, I mean, I don't think it's a secret that male athletes do struggle with that. I mean, showing emotion and how you navigate that. And so being able to, you're building that community, something that you wanted and you needed when you were going through that transition yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the power of community is really, it's so powerful, and the energy that you can create by coming together. And, it's one thing I think the one thing that everybody misses, especially in team athletics, is that locker room and the camaraderie. And, one thing I ask, the same answer I get across the board when I ask people and athletes what they miss the most, and they always say the locker room, the guys, the camaraderie. And so creating community where they can just, tap into that, I think is really important.
Absolutely. And so, Joe, if is there a website up yet or a social media handle that people can go to learn more about the Heart Collective?
Yeah, there's a landing page on Instagram. It's at the.heart.collective, and heart is spelled HART. The website is under construction, but it's going to be theheartcollective.com. You can always find me. It's going to be all on my main page on Instagram as well, at joe.hawley, HAWLEY. And also you can find me on my website, joe-hawley.com.
Perfect. I mean, that's great. And then, of course, when it does officially launch, we'll promote it and push it out. But it's great, Joe, that this is, I love the platform that you're creating. And so looking forward, knowing where you came from and everything you've accomplished and overcome in your own journey and leading you to where you are today, looking forward to help all these other young men transitioning and all these, with the idea of helping so many athletes in transition, helping them navigate that because of your own experiences, being able to draw on that and wanting to use that to help others. Joe, I just have one final question that I ask all of my interviewees. What do you want to be remembered for?
Oh, what do I want to be remembered for? I think the biggest gift that anybody can offer another is presence. And I would love to be remembered as somebody that embodied presence and love in every moment. And I know that's a difficult thing to do, but I believe that the world would be a way better place if everybody would just be more present for others and show love, rather than connecting to fear. So I think, loving presence, being remembered for embodying that would be amazing.
Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more about our guest, check out the show notes at keepmovingforward.us. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on all things coming out of the KMF Collective Studio. Always remember, you can beat the odds and go the distance if only you keep moving forward.